And we'll start the national discussion by going over your college football playoff teams that you had in the Pick Six preview. So you have as your number one Georgia, number two Michigan, number three Florida State, and number four Ohio State. So some teams that are in that blue blood category and ones that are sniffing it right around the outside of it too. But from a Big Ten perspective, we're looking at another two teams in it, according to the Pick Six preview. So Ohio State and Michigan making it for a second straight year. How'd you come to this conclusion? How'd you get to these four teams?
Yeah, well, I'll start at the top with Georgia. It's just the most proven product in college football right now. They recruit right there with Alabama. They continue to reload after sending record NFL draft classes to the pros. And I think that when you listen to these players post-game or post-practice in the notes, they still are motivated. They still think they're the underdog. So credit Kirby Smart for being a master motivator, really, keeping them hungry, chasing a third national title. They're looking to become the first team since Minnesota in the 30s to go 3 straight consecutive outright titles. So would be incredible to pull that off. They're the odds-on favorite, though. I think that they have 5 stars at every position and really a favorable schedule, too, when you look at this. They avoid a lot of the Giants in the SEC West and nothing out of conference to bat an eye at. So they're number one. For the Big Ten, this is Michigan's best team yet, and this is coming off of back-to-back conference titles, 2 playoff appearances in a row. Usually what happens with playoff teams is they send the bulk of their starting lineup to the pros the next year, or they go to the pros early. Not with Michigan. I think it's a record the amount of production they have coming off of a playoff team. So led by the best offensive line in the country, I think they win the conference again. And Ohio State, I still have in the bracket. As you can see, they're number 4. I think there's enough roster talent. It's still an elite offense, and I think that they're going to still get in there, whether it be 11-1 and they back in like last year or some other scenario. But now the wild card pick I have is Florida State coming out of the ACC. I think they just cracked into the preseason poll and the coaches poll around 8, but I've got them up at number 3. And a couple quick reasons why. Last year was really the breakthrough year statistically. You look at their metrics, my numbers, they're top 10 in almost everything, and that was last year. They now bring back the number 1 most returning production off that team. The whole thing's back. They got key NFL decisions from some defenders. But really, and this is the other game changer, is how they've embraced the transfer portal. Another top 5 transfer haul. While Clemson ignores the portal and is now thin at some positions, Florida State has really bolstered their roster. So I think they're going to beat Clemson and win the conference and get in there as a 1-loss conference champ.
Mm-hmm. Now, a year or two ago, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was 2 years ago. This question goes to Dave. Brett, you had North Carolina, and Dave, you had North Carolina in your playoff, and Dave took question with that. Dave, do you have any questions with any of this compared to the North Carolina pick a couple years ago?
No, not as much. That's for certain. I see where Brett's coming with Florida State. I mean, I think they're trending in the right direction, and I think it's the question of, do you think they can beat Clemson in the ACC, right? And that game is early in the season, right, Brett? I mean, it's like late September. So if Florida State can win that one game, I think they're in pretty good position to really run the table there. And so, I mean, they're by no means a guarantee, but if they could beat Clemson early, they're going to be in position. So I get it. With Georgia, totally, I mean, you can't take them, but I guess my fun question on that one is like, so we're probably the last team to try to go for a three-peat, right? We went back-to-back 94-95. So, we didn't get that done. So in this year, if you want to translate that 1996 Nebraska team, who on Georgia's schedule is their Arizona State?
Yeah. Where's
probably not Ball State or Tennessee Martin, so we can rule those 2 out.
They were like, oh my goodness, they just didn't come prepared and they blew it.
Yeah. Well, maybe Missouri. I mean, Missouri played them tough last year, and they're really one-dimensional. It's really just an elite defense. So maybe something like that could happen. But I think Tennessee is too highly ranked to be considered off the radar. So that's probably their toughest test is Tennessee. But yeah, I agree with you. The UNC pick will never leave me. I've had some hits, I've had some misses. I've had some really good hits, some really bad misses, but nothing will come close to the UNC. I might as well have had it tattooed on me. I mean, it's that was the worst one. That was the worst one in Pick Six history.
To your credit, Brett. last year you had Utah, and Utah made a run. They didn't quite get it done, but they were close.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, Utah. Of course they threw an interception in the end zone in the opener against Florida, and that sunk the playoff pick before we even got off the starting blocks. But they won the conference again. Proved me right there. Everyone had USC to win the league. I went Utah again. They continue to prove me right in the Pac-12, and I actually have them there a third time this year to win the Pac-12 over USC. So we'll see. But Utah's a proven product. Florida State, a lot more variable. I just have a little bit of faith in the returning production, the transfer haul they brought in, and a lot of that, that dual threat quarterback, Jordan Travis, NFL talent. So, and really, it's almost more of a testament to how weak the ACC is. It's almost, you can look at it that way, where besides Clemson, I don't see any competitor at all. So, even if they lose to LSU, I still think they have a mulligan there. If they beat LSU in the opener, then they're really sitting pretty. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Dave mentioned the 1996 team with Nebraska being the last time that we could have had a three-time repeat champ. Kind of the downfall of that year was just you lost a lot from the 95 team, quarterback and everything, and you're replacing that. Even with a lot of talent, ton of talent came back in 96, just wasn't able to get over the hump, went 11-2, not a bad year. If you look at Georgia right now, losing Bennett, losing that quarterback, that solid person you've had back there now for the last few years, is there a chink in the armor somewhere with Georgia that, you could see one or two or three close losses, or is there just such a talent differential? I mean, you think at worst this is 11-1. I mean, what do you look at when you're looking at number one right now?
Well, I think if you're looking at raw talent, I don't see any holes on the roster. It's a boring answer, but it's 5 stars everywhere. So unless all the 5 stars, unless they missed on all their 5 stars, which is extremely rare, you talk with Stetson Bennett leaving, he was an incredible college quarterback, but they have multiple 5 stars battling to be a successor. I think the flaw, if you want to find one, I don't think it's player personnel, but it could be coordinator-wise, where they lose Todd Monken, the mastermind of their offense. He really helped modernize that team. If you look back at Georgia 5 years ago, it was still old-fashioned, stuck-in-the-mud offense, but he really modernized them. Now he's with, I think, the Baltimore Ravens, and they're going through a coordinator change there. So if there is a weakness, maybe you lose some of that play calling and scheme edge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Well, let's get to the conferences then on a national level. And the SEC, you've got Georgia winning that. The Big Ten, you have Michigan. The ACC, you have Florida State. Big 12, you have Texas. And then the Pac-12, from what we could tell, is it just right now you couldn't make a decision? Is it Utah and Washington tied, or how are you looking at the Pac-12? I guess with those two.
Yeah, so I have Utah winning it, but in terms of the conference ranking prediction, like the standings prediction, I have them both finishing with the same conference record. For that point of view, tie. It's technically a tie in first place because they scrapped their divisions over there. It's no longer the North and South. It's 1 through 12. You got to rank these teams. So, but no, I see a Las Vegas title game between Utah and Washington, with Utah winning their 3rd straight crown. No USC there. I think that it's still a major liability on defense for them. And I have enough trust in Utah's staff and players. Very quietly, that whole team is back from last year. The one that beat USC twice and embarrassed them in Las Vegas, that whole team's back. So I think they're going to get it done again.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the health of Cam Rising? You think he's playing early in the season, or he's going to come back slow?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a question point, and so is the health of their tight end, Brent Keithy. They were both held out of spring. When I watched the spring game, they were there in their T-shirts and hats. So I think that they're still projected to make it. Now, a matter of weeks could be the difference of missing 4 games or 0 games. So if that's the case, I mean, they won a couple games without Rising last year. I like their backup, Nate Johnson. He's a speed demon quarterback. He's really fast runner. And I'm sure he's getting all the ones reps all off season. So I think they're going to be fine early on. Now, they do draw some tough openers with Florida and Baylor, but in terms of a conference race, I'm picking a conference winner. The Rising will be back for all that.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. I agree.
Hey, Boomer, you grew up in West Texas. You were even a Longhorn fan at times growing up. What are your thoughts here? You see the Big 12, the last year of Texas in the Big 12 on top.
Is Texas back?
Are you buying Texas there, Boomer? Are you buying?
No, not until they actually win the conference and God only knows, you know.
But
We might
Boomer,
have
Quinn
some.
Ewers cut his hair.
Well, that's true. But I was just saying, you know,
Humble
we
as
might
fuck.
have some familiarity with, you know, Big 12 refereeing, you know, when you're leaving the conference. So you never know what could happen there in some of those conference games. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, when you
it'll
say
be
is-
well, yeah, that's just kind of the odd thing. You look at a lot of these teams, and how many of them aren't in these conferences next season, so or after this season.
Oof.
So it's crazy.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's
Brett,
talk-
when you
Brett,
think
Brett,
about when you think about if Texas is back or not, you got to consider they've ruined more conferences than national titles they've won. So I mean, they are back to doing that. You've seen Pac-12 wiped away as a domino of what they did. So they're back to doing that at least.
Well, I have a question too, though, about that because I saw Texas on there. It's interesting because teams like TCU, Kansas State, and Oklahoma, right? You have them all basically 1, 2, 3, 4 on there, and I'm curious why Texas over the other three. Kansas State, you know, looked good in the first half at least against Alabama at one point, but you know, Oklahoma, TCU coming out of a national championship. So what's the, you know, what's that about?
Yeah, so we'll start with TCU. Incredible one-year turnaround by Sonny Dykes. They lose the entire offense. So I mean, Max Duggan gone, both the receivers, both All-American linemen, both running backs. So complete rebuild personnel-wise on offense. I do like their secondary, their back seven, but no, I think that they're going to take a little bit of a step back. With Kansas State, what a proven program builder Kleiman has become, moving up from the FCS ranks up to the Big 12, and they really grinded away a conference title last year. Very impressive. Texas beat them last year, though. And then when you look at Oklahoma, still a very mystery team, a wild card team. They recruit the best in the conference, right there with Texas, looking for a second-year bonus under Venables this year. But what led me to the Texas pick, first, I always like to look back at last year. Statistically, so they had a couple close losses. They were top 10 on both sides of the ball in a lot of metrics. And they bring back a lot. I think 9 starters or 10 starters back from the offense, only losing Bijan Robinson. And yes, that's a huge loss, but the rest of the thing is back. Great transfer hauls again. I don't really see a weakness. And then when you look at coordinators, I like both of them. Pete Kwiatkowski, he built those Washington defenses that made the playoff about 5 or 6 years ago. And Kyle Flood, a great offensive line developer. So they look like the total package, and I understand that Texas usually underperforms against expectations. So, you know, I'm not confident enough to put them in the playoff, but they're my pick right now in a very uncertain league to win it here.
Yeah, speaking of uncertain leagues like that, when you have a scenario like in the Big 12 where you've got BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston all joining, how do you slot them in, and how do you go about kind of judging how they fit?
Yeah, that was a new feature of the book this year, adding so many new teams. That's we've had the same Power 5 lineup for a while. So, yeah, I got to welcome in UCF, Houston, Cincinnati. I think it's a significant step up in competition. And I know that Cincinnati and UCF, that they've had their wins over the Power 5 on the national stage, but that might have been a bowl game here and there or an opener. To do it 9 straight weeks, it's a whole new beast. So I think it's a big step up in talent they're going to be facing off against, and only UCF out of that pack do I have in the top half of the conference. I think the other 3 are going to go through some growing pains. Houston, I have dead last in the league. BYU tied in 9th, and Cincinnati down at 12th. Cincinnati might have been higher, but they lost their coaching staff and lost a ton of players to the transfer portal, mass exodus, and a lot more to the pros. So complete rebuilds for Cincy and Houston.